New Zealand's charity sector is this incredible world built entirely on good intentions, but it's almost like it's sitting on a fault line. On one side, you have all this amazing community work happening, and on the other, the risk that all of that goodwill gets abused. So today, we're going to dive into how we navigate that really tricky divide.
To really get what's at stake here, you have to wrap your head around this one number, 1.4 million. That's how many hours Kiwis volunteer for charities, every single week. It's an absolutely staggering amount of generosity, and honestly, it forms the very backbone of our communities.
And this quote, it pretty much reframes the entire debate. It says that the tax breaks charities get aren't just a cost or a handout from the government, they're an investment. Basically, the argument is that it's way cheaper and more effective for the government to empower charities to do the work than to try and do it all themselves. This is a core idea we're going to keep coming back to. All right, so to get our heads around this complex topic, we're going to break it down into 4 parts. First up, we'll look at exactly why we value charities so much. Then we'll get into the risk of abuse. What happens when that trust is broken? After that, we'll explore the burden of regulation. And finally, we'll search for that all-important balance. So let's start with the immense value the sector brings to Aotearoa. With over 26,000 registered charities, they're not just some small part of our society. They are literally woven into its fabric, and they often deliver services with incredible efficiency. But here's the thing you gotta remember. Most of these groups are financially fragile. They've got 5 main ways to get money, but look at them. 4 of them are totally dependent on the generosity or the decisions of other people. Only that last one, running a business, gives a charity some real control over its own financial destiny, because it's an income stream it can build for itself. And that leads to this classic Kiwi saying, which is the day-to-day reality for so many. They are incredibly resourceful because they absolutely have to be. This is why any discussion about changing their funding rules or adding more compliance costs is so critical. For them, this isn't some abstract policy debate. It's about survival. Okay, so that brings us to the other side of the coin, the central conflict here. A system that's built on tax breaks and public trust is powerful for sure, but it's also incredibly vulnerable. This is the question that must keep regulators up at night, because while the vast majority of charities are doing amazing work, the potential for fraud and exploitation is very, very real. And it doesn't get more real than this case from the Serious Fraud Office. You have a charity set up to help people with intellectual disabilities, right? But it was systematically looted by its own trustees. This husband and wife team took $500,000 in government funding, money meant for the most vulnerable, and spent it on themselves. The only reason they were stopped is because a brave whistleblower finally spoke up. But illegal fraud is one thing. There's a much grayer area that's completely legal, but it raises some really serious questions about whether the whole system is fair. And this is where the debate gets really complex. Okay, let's break this down, because this is the heart of the tax debate. Everyone pretty much agrees that if a charity's business is directly related to its mission, like a housing charity running social housing, its profits should be tax-exempt. Makes sense, right? But what if that same charity owns, say, a chain of fast food restaurants? Right now, in New Zealand, those profits are also tax-exempt, and that's where things get really controversial. And we are not talking about pocket change here. According to one estimate, the government is missing out on about $104 million in tax revenue every single year by allowing charities to keep the profits from these completely unrelated businesses. But hold on, cracking down on these issues isn't simple. There's this really powerful counterargument that when you try to catch a few bad actors, you can accidentally create an absolute nightmare for the thousands of good ones. Just look at this timeline. It tells a story of relentless, non-stop change. Over about a decade, the sector got hit with wave after wave of reform. A new act, then a new register, a new regulator, then another new regulator, and then new reporting standards. It's really no wonder you hear so many people in the sector talk about feeling reform fatigue. And here is where you can see how that regulatory sledgehammer can hit. This is the National Council of Women, a historic organization founded by Kate Shepherd herself. They've been a charity for over a century. But in 2010, bam, they lost that status. And you want to know why? Because the regulator decided their advocacy work, making submissions to Parliament to try and improve the lives of women and families, was too political. Just think about that for a second. The very work that was at the core of their charitable mission was used as the reason to strip them of their status. Now, to fight this and win back their registration, the council had to find $90,000 for legal fees. And get this, that was with most of the legal work being done pro bono, for free. Without that help, they would have had no way to challenge the decision in the High Court. And this is the result, a chilling effect. See, when the only way to appeal a regulator's decision is through a super expensive high court battle, many legitimate charities will simply give up. They're forced to shut down or change what they do, not because they did anything wrong, but because they just can't afford to prove they're right. So, where does all of this leave us? Let's look at the path forward. How in the world do we find that balance between enabling all the good and preventing all the bad? This table lays out the two sides very clearly. On one side, you've got proposals to tax that unrelated business income and give the regulator more power. But on the other side, the sector is asking for a much broader, first principles review of the whole law, simpler rules for the little guys, and a cheaper, more accessible way to appeal decisions. And this really gets to the heart of the sector's philosophy. Groups like HUIA, Community Aotearoa, argue that the goal shouldn't just be to regulate and punish. It has to be about education and support to help charities do their work well. They believe a healthier, more compliant sector comes from empowerment, not just enforcement. And that leaves us with this final, crucial question. It really is the fundamental dilemma at the heart of charity law, not just in New Zealand, but all around the world. How do we design a system that empowers those millions of hours of generosity we see every week without accidentally creating loopholes for those who would exploit that same goodwill? Finding that answer? Well, that's the challenge ahead.